Hi, welcome to Far From Eden. Happy Sunday, everybody. I hope it's a good one for you, or has been. By the time this premieres, it'll be this evening. And I hope it's a great one for you. I hope it's restful. And this world is harsh. I mean, you do need to make sure you take care of yourselves. And I know there's mostly men watching, and so that's especially important. I think women definitely want to take care of themselves all the time. They'll say they don't, but I think the evidence is otherwise. Anyway, on this channel on Sundays, we have a fairy tale. And you might go, well, what does that have to do with any kind of men's issues? Or what does it have to do really with anything? Why is it even relevant anymore? Because truth is always relevant. Always. I mean, the truth shall make you free, after all. One of the people in the comments described what we do on Sundays, because we've also read, old poems and other even radio broadcasts, right? We have gone to the past to see, well, what did they say back then? And one of the people in the comments called it literary archaeology. I love that so much. I didn't even realize it. This happened by accident because we were comparing the wokeness of the fairy tales. And when I got into it, I realized why they changed it and how that affected the whole princess mentality that a lot of women have. This whole, I deserve this, I deserve that, based off of, they don't know it's based off of this. They're not thinking, oh, I want to be like Cinderella, but they are, they want to be treated like princesses. They want all the perks of the prince, right? Without any kind of responsibility. And just based off of beauty that they claim to have. So we got into the fairy tales, and now we're digging through all of them one by one until the Grimm fairy tales, until we run out of those, and then we'll get into Hans Christian Andersen. And there's a ton of things that for some reason we don't tell these stories anymore. I don't think it's an accident. I don't think it's an accident. I think as they revised these stories, the first ones came out in 1812 and 1815. And when they revised them in the 20th century, they were different. They removed things like Christ, being pious, things like that. Things that, I don't know, in today's verbiage, you would say things that women bring to the table. Requirements, goodness. And they erased some of the consequences and accountability. And I'm sure they, and if you know who they are, the elites, the powerful, the ones pulling the strings on all of this, they wanted to change our worldview, everyone's worldview, but particularly the women, because the women were reading these stories to the children. And whatever stories we hear as children shape our worldview and shape how we see ourselves. And it's, again, like I said, it's not that women have said, oh, I want to be like Sleeping Beauty. I never thought I want to be like this princess or that princess, but I know, because I'm honest, that it's basically like downloading something. It's wiring your mind when you're younger. So they took away the fairy tales of, say, the Grimm brothers, for example, and replaced it with the Disney version, which helped to shape modern women into what they are today. Not just that, the women of the 1950s, who I will say had soft life. I do not think that those are, hardworking, housewives. I think that was just about like soap operas and things like that. And I say the 50s. I'm not being specific necessarily about a certain decade. This is colloquially what we refer to when we think of, Donna Reed, for example, like Leave It to Beaver's mother. Those women had soft life. Like, it wasn't hard. It's okay. So why bother? What's it going to change? Is it going to matter? Why bother looking into all these truths that the elites want to hide from us and change? Why bother looking into it? What difference is it actually going to make? Well, if you look at it that way, probably not a whole lot on the grand scale. We can't, argue with them and change them. But what we do need, and I learned this from listening to a lot of you, is that you need to have a true north. And you need to touch base with it regularly, especially in this world that's full of, I don't even like that they say mistruths and misinformation. No, it's full of lies. It's lies. Not only that, men are treated poorly, they're taken advantage of. And the vast majority of you nowadays, because of Instagram and the ability for women to believe that they have all these options of, the 8s, 9s, and 10s, so many of you are absolutely invisible to them as a possible mate, which robs you of any family and therefore a lot of your purpose. Because men work historically to provide for a family that in turn, was valuable to them. But now there are so many men that are depressed and alone because they're told they're bad. They'd rather choose a bear. Apparently, that's how bad most of you are, according to these women. It is not, men have feelings, men are people, right? And so since you're bombarded with these messages all the time, and maybe even, dealing with family court or whatever struggle you're having, it's somewhere on that spectrum. Unless you're 8, 9, or 10 and you don't care about morals and you're just having all the funsies, the rest of the men, which is the majority of them, are not. So will knowing the truth and studying the truth change those people? Will it change the women? Will it change the powerful? Probably not. But you're not the type to just burn it all down. That's not what you guys do. That's why you're walking away. Because you're not I'll just burn the whole place down. That's not who you are. Seeking truth and studying truth feeds your soul because of who you are. Because you are made in the image of God. When you seek truth, you seek him. And you don't have to believe me. You can think it's a sky daddy, I think some of you call it. But regardless, it works. And I don't think you can make a good argument that it doesn't, unless you're basing it off of leftist lies. So anyway, without getting political and everything, the more we do this, the more it feeds my soul too. We don't find, as we're mining, and we're mining and it's literary archaeology, we don't find giant gold nuggets every single time. Sometimes the lessons are just very, very basic because children need those, right? Because these were stories for children. But we didn't have them for the most part. We were exchanging, if we were read to, I think last week. But many of us didn't have enough, didn't have the ones with the actual lessons. It was more entertainment purposes. So we sort of have to go back. And I know a lot of Gen Xers, and credit to Bjorn, the Norwegian bushcraftsman, that said in one of his videos, Gen X was raised on hose water and neglect. And that is now one of my sayings because it's true. But many other generations, like millennials, ever since women went to mothers went to work, hose water and neglect, because school's raising the kids, right? So we have to kind of, I don't know about y'all, but I've had to go back and almost raise myself. So today, because we're going in the order of my book over here, but we're making sure we have the actual earliest version, not the wokeified 1930 version, which is insane for me to think that, because I used to think go back to the early 20th century and that's old. No, not enough. The further back you go, the more truth you find, because they took it away piece by piece and kept us busy with all sorts of bread and circuses, from movies to sports. Today's fairy tale, in the order of the book, there is, and I'm not gonna say these right, so forgive me, Jorinda and Joringel. I know there's a few of you in the chat that will tell me how it's pronounced. And this one is from 1812. Okay. Jorinda and Joringel. There once was an old castle in the midst of a large and thick forest, and in it an old woman. You guys. Okay. And in it an old woman who was a witch dwelt all alone. In the daytime, she changed herself into a cat or a screech owl, but in the evening, she took her proper shape again as a human being. She could lure wild beasts and birds to her, and then she killed and boiled and roasted them. That's not okay. If anyone came within 100 paces of the castle, he was obliged to stand still and could not stir from the place until she bade him be free. But whenever an innocent maiden came within this circle, she changed her into a bird and shut her up in a wickerwork cage and carried the cage into a room in the castle. She had about 7,000 cages of rare birds in the castle. Okay. Whoa. All right. I have searched for, done Google searches to find the fairy tale with these sorts of characters, and this didn't pop up. And this first paragraph is a gold nugget to me. And it's an innocent maiden. Whenever an innocent maiden came within the circle, she changed her into a bird and shut her up in a wickerwork cage. Why? Why would she do that? She hates innocence. She hates innocent maidens. There's some things that haven't changed at all, because truth doesn't change. All right. Now there was a maiden who was called Jorinda, fairer than all other girls. She and a handsome youth named Joringel had promised to marry each other. There were still in the days of betrothal, and their greatest happiness was being together. One day, in order that they might be able to talk together in quiet, they went for a walk in the forest. "Take care," said Joringel, "that you do not go too near the castle." It was a beautiful evening. The sun shone brightly between the trunks of the trees into the dark green of the forest. And the turtle doves sang mournfully upon the young boughs of the birch trees. Jorinda wept now and then. She sat down in the sunshine and was sorrowful. Joringel was sorrowful too. They were as sad as if they were about to die. Then they looked around them and were quite at a loss, for they did not know by which way they should go home. The sun was still half above the mountain and half set. Joringel looked through the bushes and saw the old walls of the castle close at hand. He was horror-stricken and filled with deadly fear. Jorinda was singing, "My little bird with the necklace red, sing sorrow, sorrow, sorrow. He sings that the dove must soon be dead. Sing sorrow, sorrow, jug, jug, jug." Just want to take a moment here. Joringel is aware of the situation. He's aware of the danger. And he is thinking about that and serious. Meanwhile, the fair Jorinda is singing to the bird. Now, this is a type of female privilege that we have. Also, I'm going to point out a female strength. When you're in a family setting and say there's danger or there's this or there's lack, say there's not enough to eat, and I'm talking about before welfare and all that stuff, reality. It's up to the man to worry about those things. And that is his strength, to figure it out. The children, and in families there were just children back then, it just was for the most part, right? Of course, there were women who were barren, but for the most part, couples had children because that's what results in the activities. So what the woman would need to do is be strong for the children. You know, you're not going to try and stress out the 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 10-year-old. I know nowadays children are exposed to those sorts of stresses and issues, and that is not good for them. It damages them. They do need some reality, but at age-appropriate levels. And one of the strengths that women have is to focus on the joy and keep the atmosphere good for the children. And I know some of you are like, what women are you talking about? I know. They rarely exist anymore, but they did exist back then. They did. That was the strength. That's the strength of a woman. We've destroyed that. Society has destroyed it. The powerful have destroyed that because they knew that it would then destroy the men. They got to the men through the women. Anyways, I don't know why my camera is showing that, but hopefully we're good. So she's singing and he's concerned. Joringel looked for Jorinda. She was changed into a nightingale. Oh my gosh. Because she was singing, and that's why it changed to jug, jug, jug. Joringel looked for Jorinda. She was changed into a nightingale and sang jug, jug, jug. A screech owl with glowing eyes flew 3 times about her, and 3 times cried, "Too-hoo, too-hoo, too-hoo." Joringel could not move. He stood there like a stone and could neither weep nor speak nor move hand or foot. She turned the women into birds, and she made it so the men couldn't move. Is she today's elites? Is she representative of that? Because, you know, I don't know. I'm seeing some symbolism that, yeah. The sun had now set. The owl flew into the thicket, and directly afterwards, there came out of it a crooked old woman, yellow and lean, with large red eyes and a hooked nose. the point of which reached to her chin. She muttered to herself, caught the nightingale, and took it away in her hand. Joringel could neither speak nor move from the spot. The nightingale was gone. At last the woman came back and said in a hollow voice, "Greet thee, Zachiel. If the moon shines on the cage, Zachiel, let him loose at once." Who's Zachiel? Then Joringel was freed. He fell on his knees before the woman and begged that she would give him back his Jorinda. But she said that he should never have her again and went away. He called, he wept, he lamented, but all in vain. Ah, what is to become of me? Joringel went away and at last came to a strange village. There he kept sheep for a long time. He often walked round and round the castle, but not too near it. I've been told by a few men that men often fall in love when they're young, and it's always that girl, always in their heart. And this sounds like that. At last, he dreamt one night that he found a blood-red flower in the middle of which was a beautiful large pearl, that he picked the flower and went with it to the castle, and that everything he touched with the flower was freed from enchantment. He also dreamt that by means of it he recovered his Jorinda. Blood-red flower. In the middle was a beautiful large pearl. Interesting. In the morning, when he awoke, he began to seek over hill and dale if he could find such a flower. He sought until the 9th day, and then, early in the morning, he found the blood-red flower. In the middle of it, there was a large dewdrop, as big as the finest pearl. Day and night he journeyed with this flower to the castle. When he was within 100 paces of it, he was not held fast, but walked on to the door. Joringel was full of joy. He touched the door with the flower, and it sprang open. He walked in through the courtyard and listened for the sound of the birds. At last he heard it. He went on and found the room from whence it came, and there the witch was feeding the birds in the 7,000 cages. When she saw Joringel, she was angry, very angry, and scolded and spat poison and gall at him. But she could not come within 2 paces of him. He did not take any notice of her, but went and looked at the cages with the birds, but there were many hundred nightingales. How was he to find his Jorinda again? Just then, he saw the old woman quietly take away a cage with a bird in it and go towards the door. Swiftly, he sprang towards her, touched the cage with the flower, and also the old woman. She could now no longer bewitch anyone, and Jorinda was standing there, clasping him around the neck, and she was as beautiful as ever. The end. I love this one so much. This is a warning about an old woman who lives alone. Because what would such a woman be, really? Nowadays, it's like, oh, she's strong and independent, right? Back then, not so much. You know? Not so much. It was a little suspicious. Why not have a family? Why, Because there's something wrong with the character, to say the least. And this woman was bitter against innocent maidens and the men who would protect them. She paralyzed the men who would protect the innocent. And she changed the innocent and captured it. Nowadays, women are captured by lies. Lies of the state. The state puts forth propaganda. I don't think for 1 second that it's just the corporations, ABC, NBC, CBS. I don't think so. I don't think it's Disney, MGM, all those. I think it's the powers that be are all in it together. They all benefit from it. And they have for a very long time. People say absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think power corrupts. And I also think that only the corrupt seek to have power over someone else. Because why do you want to tell other people what to do? Like, what makes you think, what makes one person think that they should have that kind of control and power over others? To me, that's already corruption. That's already a lack of character. You already at the start can't trust them. There aren't these benevolent people who want to rule over you. I'm sure in history there have been better ones. And a lot of those, I get it now. And I'm not advocating for any sort of government, but I'm just saying, if you rise through inheriting a title, well, you didn't seek it, did you? And there are duties that you have to do for your people. Just saying, there's things that we're not taught because they want us to be like, oh yeah, bureaucratic government is way better. They'll check each other. They don't check each other. They're not checking each other. They fight amongst themselves for who can have the power over us, but they don't. The interest is not to actually serve us. They want to look like that so they can keep the scheme going, but they have concocted all of this. And I hate to quote a movie, but there's a part in the movie Catching Fire, which is the sequel to The Hunger Games, where Katniss, who's from one district, because the districts are all pitted against each other, and she's getting ready to fire her arrow at the guy from another district, and he says to her, Katniss, remember who the real enemy is. She thinks for a second. She realizes, we're not enemies of each other. That's what they want. So she turns her arrow to the government, basically. And I think that's where we are. Now, the problem is that half of us, this type of half, don't understand why they're doing what they're doing, and they don't know the lies they've been fed through media, through entertainment, even commercials. They don't know that. In this country, we're so lucky because, women are allowed to work and we're allowed to vote and we're allowed to do all these things. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I thought, allowed? You could take what if, let's just play this thought experiment, right? What if we thought of it a different way and we said, oh, in our country, we make our women work. We make our women vote. We make our women do this, this, and this. You change the verb, it changes everything, right? In our heads. They'll tell us when we're young, oh, that's when women weren't allowed to do this, weren't allowed to do that. You know what we're not allowed to do nowadays? Be excited about being a mother and a wife. We're not allowed to prioritize that. We're not allowed to choose that without massive scrutiny. I'm hardly allowed to talk about it. I'm not telling anybody else what they have to do. Women were never prevented from working. They were never prevented from going to school or anything like that in this country. They just wanted to fulfill their roles as wives and mothers, and they didn't choose it. The ones who did, did. You know, the female power women kind of like to say, well, we have all these women inventors and women that did all these things. How so if they're not allowed to, if they were so oppressed? You can't have both, right? You can't have both. And again, this is all the confusion and lies and everything. It's the reason we have a fairy tale on Sundays. I had now used that so many times. To the few people that know that I have this channel, this is like my secret identity in my life. And I'll just be talking about one of these issues and I'll say, well, once again, that's why we have a fairy tale on Sunday. Because this Jorinda and Joringel, this is huge. This witch woman, there's a lot of them out here. Don't think that they have to look like, and maybe, oh my goodness gracious, don't think they have to look like the Wicked Witch of the West in Wizard of Oz to actually be a witch. I'm slowly getting through occult feminism, and it's nothing to do with the book. It's fantastic. I'm just, some days are better than others for me and more conducive to reading. But it all did start with the occult. And so many Grimm Brothers fairy tales have a witch in them. So many times the bad guy is a woman. Why would they ever do that? Because these are warnings of what to avoid and what not to become. They're full of warnings. What to avoid and what not to become. I really enjoyed this one. I can't wait to hear you guys' feedback on this. It does feed my soul to check in with the truth. And I think it just makes perfect sense to do it on Sundays. I am a believer, and I believe that God is truth. So I believe when you seek truth, you seek him. And I dare you, you don't believe in God? Okay. I dare you then. Keep seeking truth. Absolute truth, not propaganda. Keep seeking truth. And see what you find. Because he'll be waiting there at the end and say, hello. Because, and that's why you ever notice how men read nonfiction? Women generally do not read nonfiction. As far as nonfiction and women, they'll read true crime, right? Because then they get to identify with the victim and whatever. But for the most part, no, women don't seek out nonfiction. They read fiction. And I'm not saying it's a fault or this or that, but I'm saying men are wired, written on their hearts, seek truth. Men seek truth, and they are drawn to nature. And I think those are, if you're lost, depressed, alone, I think those are good places to start. I really do. You'll be surprised if you decide to, really commit yourself to knowing what's true and challenging, because it might really, sometimes it's a little scary to really go, wow, I've believed a lot of lies over the years, but there's power in it. It will increase your inner fortitude. It will be a shield for you against the onslaught of lies and attacks that you face in this life where you're treated as disposable every day. So that's just my advice. Don't have to take it, but it's advice from someone who cares about you. And there's not a whole lot of people out there who truly do, which is a travesty. Thank you guys for joining me with this fairy tale. It was so amazing. I will probably reread it when this video is over, and I look forward to sharing this with you in the premiere and in the chat. So feed your souls, protect your peace, absolutely protect your peace. Do not let anyone destroy it. The enemy comes to lie, cheat, and destroy, and he definitely wants to destroy your peace. That's why it's under attack every day. So, love you guys. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.